It's early morning on the 5th day of Sukkot. A little camping spot, and lit up our torches to represent the 7 assemblies of the book of Revelation, and this one is Philadelphia, burning bright and clear here, right in front of the camp here that we have in front of the building. Philadelphia, and we got our other torches. I don't have enough oil to light up Smyrna or Ephesus, so I only have 5 lit right now. I have to wait for Fred Meyer to open to get some more oil, or Home Depot. Anyway, I don't think I can get the moon, but let me see if I can. Well, you can, of course, sort of see the moon. I wish I could show you the stars, but I don't think my iPad is high quality enough. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Well, happy 5th day of Sukkot. This is Daniel John Lee. Woke up really early this morning, and Yahweh was just sort of speaking to me. And I read a passage from Luke chapter 16. And it had always been a passage that I kind of didn't quite understand. And it's talking about where there's this, it's a parable that Yahshua tells, and it's about this unjust steward who really has made a failure of his worldly business, and his boss is like, hey, what have you done? And so this unjust steward, he goes to these different clients that he has, and he says, I know you owe me 100, so give me 50. And then he goes another one, I know you owe me 100, give me 80. Basically trying to negotiate deals as a last minute thing to try to, not get his boss mad at him. And so he negotiates, and he uses his worldly wisdom, and he brings his boss, not all of the money, but at least, he was able to negotiate to get some of it. And his boss is like, oh, good job. You made the best of the situation. And then Yahshua says, he says, look, the children of the world, this unjust steward, they're wiser when it comes to the things of the world business than the children of the light are. And then he makes this really weird statement that I never understood. He says, make ye yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that ye may be accepted into everlasting habitations. I was like, ooh, that sounds kind of weird. And then he goes on to say, if you're faithful in least, then I'll entrust you with much. But if you can't even basically take care of the unrighteous mammon, or the little things, the least things, then how do you expect me to entrust you with the major things in heaven? Which, to me, that's saying very clearly, the scripture says, whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. So if you're working for, the unrighteous mammon, you're working for the world, who are just centered on themselves, but you're, it's part of your business career, and you're doing that. You're not to work as unto them, you work as unto Yah, and you behave wisely. Sort of like that unjust steward, you do the best you can. And then if you're faithful in that little bit, then he'll entrust you with much. But you're not working for the mammon, okay? That's not your God. You're not working for the boss. You're working for Yah. And you want to be a good testimony to your boss and a good testimony to others by being faithful. And Yahshua says, look, if you're faithful in these little business things, because making money is, the American dollar is very least when it comes to eternal things. But if you're faithful in those little things, he'll entrust you with much in eternity. But then he then gives a warning. He says, you can't serve mammon and me. You got to choose one or the other, because if you serve mammon, you're going to miss it. So he gives a warning, because he says, yes, you need to be faithful and be a good example and work the best you can with these people in the world, or worldly bosses, but don't lose sight of who you're working for. You're working for Yah, and it's not about making money on earth to pay bills or get goods, but it's about being a faithful, good witness. Like when I go and work at my job for real estate, I'm not a real estate agent, but I set appointments for real estate agents. I always say every day, Yah, help me to work as good as I can at this job. And it's, Yahshua says, hey, you're faithful in least, I'll then entrust you with the real things, which is when, we rule and reign with him. But he gives a warning in that. He says, as you're doing the best you can, and you're being like that unjust steward, where you're doing the best you can and you try to be the best testimony possible in these worldly matters, don't lose sight that you're doing this for Yah, and don't start becoming in love with mammon yourself. So then all of a sudden I realized, oh, there's a warning embedded in this. He says, yes, be wise, do the best you can so I can entrust you much, but don't lose sight of what you're doing. And that's why he says, because if you start becoming friends and with mammon, or you start serving mammon rather than Yah, and you start becoming like the very world that you're working with, then they'll receive you into everlasting habitations. When you fail, you're going to go to, to not a good place. So there's a warning embedded in that. So I think there's sort of a multi-layered message. Number one, he says, boy, a lot of these worldly people are more wise when it comes to dealing with the business world than, the children of the light, which is a shame. And then he says, he's sort of reminding us, hey, as children of the light, you need to be working to the best of your ability, whether it's a so-called spiritual thing or not. If you're working for a worldly boss or clients or an employer, you do the best you can. But then there's another warning that says, but in doing that, don't start falling in love with mammon and making that your God, because you can't serve both. So there's like several layers to this parable. So I think the takeaway is, when we go to our jobs, first of all, we should not spiritualize part of our lives. Oh, it's spiritual to do Sukkot, but then when I finish Sukkot and go back to my job, it's somehow not spiritual. No, everything we do is spiritual. Everything, whether I'm working at a job or cooking a meal or taking out the trash or cleaning the church or doing Sukkot or praying, it's all spiritual. It's all, King David always inquired of Yah. Saul was very presumptuous. He'd always jump ahead and not. But David always waited and sought Yah on every decision he made. And that's how we should be, no matter what. Yah, help me to cook this meal. Yah, help me to go do groceries. Yah, help me as I work at my job, my worldly job, and make this unrighteous mammon and, be a good testimony. Help me. So there's that. But then there's the warning that says, as you excel in your job and you prosper, don't become in love with this mammon, this money that so many other people in the world are driven by, because then you're going to really miss it and you're going to wind up in the wrong spot. And then he says, hey, if you're faithful in the least, which that's what making money is, it's the least. If you're faithful in these little things, I'll make sure to put you in charge of the real things when you rule and reign with me. So it's sort of a multi-layered thing. So I think we need to make sure we're doing the best we can at our jobs. Obviously, we work with integrity, and we do the best we can with those who are, of the world and don't know Yahshua, and it's a testimony to them as well. So that's there. We don't make money our God. Money is simply a tool to serve Yah and to promote his kingdom. In fact, whenever we do make money, we are commanded to give 10%, our first 10% to widows and orphans, and then another 10% we put aside for the feast days. And then technically a third 10% would go to Levites, but there's no Levites, so those can go to your pastor or whatever congregation's ministering to you, because we're supposed to be in a local body. But yeah, we're supposed to take our first fruits of our increase and give it to Yah anyway. And that keeps us from, making money our God. And then we just trust in him, and then if we're faithful in those little things, then he'll entrust us with the great things when we rule and reign with him during the millennial kingdom. So there's that. And then there's this warning, don't lose sight. And so there's that. And then, standing tall, one thing that I really am blessed at with my job, and even when I interviewed, over 2 years ago to work there, I wanted to make sure that I could do the things that Yah wants me to do, even while working in a corporate office. And so I made sure that before I got hired, I could wear my tzitzit, I could wear my head covering, I could have my beard. I would always make sure that I, have Fridays off. In fact, even in winter time, I make sure I can leave earlier than 5 so that I'm done by sunset, which I'm going to be able to do this winter. I wanted to make sure I always could get the Hebrew feast days off, and have all the high Shabbats off, and just be able to do all these things. So I could be a testimony, that I could, and it's kind of cool because now I'm able to put a menorah up on my office door, and I think that's a really good testimony as well. There's a little menorah that a former coworker of mine bought for me for Hanukkah, and then after Hanukkah was over, I took off the outer layers. Now there's a 7 lampstand on my office window, or door, so that's kind of cool. So being that faithful, faithful in those little things and working into Yah, not being in love with money, because money is just, it's just how we survive and how we, build the kingdom of Yah, really. It's to help the poor, the widow, the fatherless. That's the true religion of what money's for, is for the widow, the fatherless, the poor. So it's for that. And then of course, just making sure we stick to our convictions that, I'm not going to just wear my tzitzit to Shabbat. I'm going to wear it all through the week, because I don't want to be a hypocrite. And so being a faithful witness to Yahshua and his Torah, even in the business world. And then, of course, not losing sight of, serving Yah, not mammon, making him our master and king, not anyone else we're working for. And if our bosses say, well, you have to work on Shabbat, or you cannot wear tzitzit, or whatever, we say, you know what? No, I'm going to stand for Yah, and Yah will provide me a better job. or, but I think oftentimes he'll just bless you in your current job. I've told this testimony before, but I was working for the Oregonian back in 2001 when I first learned about Shabbat. And for 7 months, I was struggling because I was like, oh, I have to work on Saturdays at the Oregonian. It's the biggest sales day. And if I say no, they're going to fire me. And it was such a good job. I mean, I was working 27 and a half hours a week and I was making $40,000 a year. So I was like, but finally I was like, you know what? I got to do what's right. So I went to my boss and I said, look, if you fire me, you fire me. I cannot work on Saturdays anymore. It's Shabbat. And he was like, what, are you Jewish? And I'm like, well, no, but you know, Jesus, he kept Shabbat and it's in the 10 Commandments and I can't do this. I'm sorry. You know, I didn't know about Shabbat. Now I do. And I just can't do it. So if you fire me, you fire me. And he's like, well, you know, you've been a good employee. I'll give you Saturdays off. Let's see how it goes. And lo and behold, as I did not work Saturdays anymore, my sales shot up. I became one of the top 5 salesmen in the room. And there was even some jealousy with some of my coworkers. They're like, how come he doesn't have to work Saturdays anymore and we do? But I didn't work Saturdays and my sales just went way up. So you keep his commandments, you're faithful in the least, he'll bless you now, and then he'll bless you in the kingdom to come. You know, you're not making Mammon your God, you're making Yah your God, and you're just working as good as possible to those in the world, and then he'll entrust you. So I think that's what that parable really means in Luke 16. There's a multi-layers. So I just wanted to share that. I hope it blesses whoever it's supposed to bless. And happy 5th day of Sukkot. Early morning now, under these beautiful moon and cold blue stars. It's kind of cold. It's like 40 degrees out. It's chilly, but it's the 5th day of Sukkot. It's a beautiful feast. It's his feast. Hallelujah. Shalom, shalom. This is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries here at Cornerstone Baptist Church. Please come out here. Revival is starting at this place. This is the most amazing congregation of believers that I've ever had the honor of being a part of. It's beautiful. So please come out here. We're at 4600 Sweegle Road. We're going to have services for the High Shabbat starting on Wednesday night at 6, and have a very merry Feast of Sukkot, the season of our joy. Shalom.